everybody. This is Peter Mullins with Fora. Really excited to have Jeff Davis here. Jeff Davis is an international keynote speaker, also author of Create Togetherness. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Peter. I'm excited to have a great conversation with you.
Terrific. Well, one of the things that really jumped out, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk to you, was because of Create Togetherness, which is a book that you published, which is about sales and marketing alignment. Love to hear a little bit about your story and how you came to write Create Togetherness, if that's okay.
Yeah, the theme of my story really is I had an epiphany that sales and marketing didn't truly understand each other, and that is really would ignite this passion to figure this thing out. Because what I knew from being in both sales and marketing is that we were interdependent like no other two groups in the organization, and we really truly need each other to be successful. And so the early part of my career, I'm an engineer by training, and I mentioned that because I think you will realize it as you read my book and as you go to any speaking engagements that I do. I'm very methodical and logical about the way I think. It's just, that's my training. But I started my career in sales, was on the street, held a bag, as they say. And I always recognized that while I think the organization I was working for, marketing understood strategy and all of that was great, they didn't always get what we needed to be successful, and a lot of times to get the deal over the line, right? It was those pieces which we refer to now as content. It was those pieces of content that would have like really made my pitch, so to say, salient with my target customer. So did that for quite some time, was really excited to like figure this marketing thing out, but didn't have the language and didn't have the visibility to the organization. So went back, got my MBA, transformed myself into a marketer, as I say. And then once I got to the marketing team, I tended to be the squeaky wheel because I was the only one with sales experience. And again, what I had kind of thought but wasn't 100% sure about was reinforced. I'm working with a ton of smart marketers that are super passionate, top MBAs, but none of them had done sales. And so it's that last piece of like execution that they didn't always get, because I was like, well, how does that look like from a sales perspective? Because at the end of the day, they're the people executing the work, right? And so fast forward, after corporate, did startups for a number of years. And then as we kind of talked in conversations prior to this, started my own consultancy, focused on helping organizations recognize that like, if you don't fix this sales marketing relationship, you're never going to achieve the success and the output and the revenue growth you want, because they're just too interdependent for them to operate in silos moving forward.
That's great. Now you had mentioned about one of the reasons for going back for your MBA was to get that language. To me, it feels like even though sales and marketing are so close, there is that language difference, isn't it? That they're talking in different terms. They're talking in different parts of the funnel. I mean, is that true?
Oh, it's completely accurate. And actually, I wrote a blog post years ago that sales speak for marketers and marketing speak for salespeople, because we do speak in different languages. And I think what I recognized was when I would interact with marketers when I was in sales is that while I understood what they were saying, there definitely was, I was like, well, I would never use that word, or like I would never say that. And then when I transitioned into the brand team, I noticed even me changing the way I spoke. And it wasn't on purpose, it was just by virtue that we were amongst the same people. We had a understood language. And I recognized when we would interact with sales leaders that they're like, you would have the same conversation, you would be having the same conversation. But I was like, that took a lot longer than it needed to for us to understand where we were coming from, because we were saying the same thing in different ways. And so what I advocate for in the book is that we don't necessarily have to change the language when we're within our silos, because I think it's okay. Like, I don't think that's damaging. I think what has to happen is two key things: that we do need to create a shared vocabulary, especially when we're talking about pipeline and overall, revenue for the organization. And when we're having those cross-functional interactions, be very mindful that we are speaking in the same terms and that we have the same definition of the same terms, because what you've considered, an MQL or SQL may not be what I consider, and what you consider to be a lead as a marketer, as a sales VP, I may not consider to be a lead. So we just need to come to common ground so that we're actually communicating the same thing and communicating effectively.
Right. And it seems like as an industry, we started to get better, because it used to be just a lead. There'd be like a capital L lead. And I don't even know what that means. And now we've gotten to, or some years ago with Serious Decisions, we've gotten to MQLs and SQAs and all the like.
Right.
Is that sufficient? Do we, are those bring in those terms for as definitions?
I don't have an issue with the terms. I know there was some talk, the last couple of years about should we kill the MQL? And actually, I think I was talking. I was talking to a marketing leader, and I've heard arguments on both sides of the fence. I don't necessarily, and this is just Jeff Davis speaking, right?
Sure.
I don't necessarily care about what we call it, as long as there's clarity about what it is, right? Because you can get so granular and have all these terminologies, but if we don't really know what it means, then you're not really communicating effectively. So if you want to call a lead, and sales and marketing are very clear, a lead is, these sort of things, or, this is their intention, whatever that looks like. Then I'm fine with that. But it's when you ask somebody what an MQL is and you get, one answer from marketing and one answer from sales, and it's like, okay, well, great, this terminology is useless because no one has the same definition.
Yeah, and I totally agree, because I think that the idea of it being exactly the same across companies, in different companies, is nonsensical, because the customer is going to be different.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but as long as you're right, but as long as sales and marketing within a single company have a shared understanding of the customer, then you can define those things correctly. Is what I would say.
Yes, that is more important to me than arguing about whether or not we should have four different definitions of what a lead is. Like, it's less important to me.
Right. So now, one of the things you call out in the book is also about goaling too, and how that can play a role, like with shared objectives, if you will. So maybe you can talk to me a little bit about that, and how taking that definition to the next step, and using that in terms of goals for sales and marketing, and how that can foster alignment.
Yeah, what I think you're alluding to is one of the key things I talk about in the book that we have to have a mind shift about is talking about incentives. And so I continue to get asked the questions like, why hasn't this been fixed? Why does this continue to happen? Because sales and marketing alignment, while I would love to say that Jeff Davis created this terminology, it is not true. It has been dysfunctional for a very long time. I think what has prompted a new conversation is that it's becoming more and more obvious that with digital acceleration, we just can't operate this way anymore. And people are recognizing their businesses that it's either stagnating growth, or it's, causing them to decline in market share, because these two sides of the organization are not getting it. And one of the things, I was on a podcast a while ago talking to a sales leader, and I shared with him that historically, and this is not to call out marketers or not to beat them up, marketing was looked at as a cost center. And so you have to look at the mindset in that most marketers, especially if you're more senior, have not really had to talk about ROI. It was just like, spend the budget, and then whatever comes out. And if it doesn't convert, it's sales fault, right? Like, that's a mindset we were coming from. That has shifted from, I would hope, well, most organizations have at least acknowledged that's not the best approach. Whether they're changing their behaviors, that's a whole different conversation, probably for a different conversation. But I say all at this stage, it comes down really simply to incentives. And so most organizations, and I call out CEOs on this when I'm talking in groups, is that if you are incentivizing me as a marketing leader to produce a certain volume of leads, I am going to do what you say, irregardless of quality. I may try to do my best to make sure they're quality leads, but if it's the difference between having high quality and missing target, or hitting target and the quality being suspect, I'm going to go with the latter, because that's what you're incentivizing me on. So we need to have that conversation first to make sure that our incentives are aligned across both organizations. And this continues to be one of the reasons why sales people and sales leaders don't always respect marketers, because they're like, well, you don't have as much skin in the game as I do, because none of your compensation is tied to revenue. And so then that leads into the fact that we can't even get there. So we've shifted the incentives, but if our goals are different and they're not strategically aligned, then it also creates a tension in how we do business. And so it starts at the top of sales and marketing leaders should be coming together. They should be saying, what is our revenue target for the year? And then backing out of that, so that the marketing leader knows, okay, this is the number of leads or interactions or engagement I need to do in order to hit that number. I've talked to organizations where they literally create goals in silos that are not interconnected. And so how can you expect an organization really to be able to hold people accountable and make sure we're moving in the right direction if there's a disconnect between what we're working toward? And so that's why it's important for them to start developing that, that overall revenue plan or marketing plan together. I always tell people, marketers, I should say, you should be building your marketing plan with sales leaders. They should be intimately involved in the process.
Right. Now, you had mentioned at the beginning the importance of like content was one of the things that you as a salesperson were calling for and asking for marketing. Now, when you're talking about revenue and like this holistic goal for marketing of focusing on revenue, it sounds like that would actually dovetail very nicely with that, right? Because then it's not just I'm gold on revenue, let me back up the dump truck with a whole bunch of leads, but you're going to be interested in what's happening post handoff, right? As a marketer.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, one of the things that as a marketer we've kind of shifted to is we have to look at the full funnel when we're looking about content. Historically, again, and this, we've been very top of funnel focused, right? It's just like
Yeah.
get the leads into the funnel and then we're done. Well, the reality of things is, the time that prospects want to spend with salespeople face to face or over the phone is continuing to decrease. And so even in the sales cadence, they're needing more content in order to keep the conversation going and to communicate effectively. So we have to be very thoughtful about creating content that spans the buyer's journey, especially when we get those interactions, because for salespeople, it is shorter. And
Yeah.
also developing systems that we can look at which pieces of content or what type of interactions are producing the best results. I very early in the consultancy would ask marketers like, which piece of content is leading to, the most conversions or the most business? Blank stare.
Yeah.
I'm like, we got to know things like that because, either we need to, dovetail off of that and create, related content, or we need to pull things and modify things. But you're not going to know that unless you ask salespeople, but B, I like a more data-driven approach so we can see, how the numbers play out. So I think it really goes back to creating this whole full funnel of content and then making sure we're staying lockstep with sales to say like, is this helping you move the conversation forward? And if not, do we need to tweak it? Do we need to add something else? Do we need to pull it, whatever that is, and then we can dynamically react to that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree about the combining the data and the qualitative. One of the tricks with the qualitative is the degree to which content influences versus drives forward. And I've seen cases where marketers are like trying to take credit for closing a deal. Right. Hey, my case study was used. It's marketing generated, right? Like how do you
Okay.
how do you walk that back so that they're still getting the data, they're still getting the influence, but keeping things in perspective.
Yeah, well, I've said this, and I continue to say it because I haven't got a ton of blowback. I usually get a little bit of a like, I always say that marketers are arrogant and salespeople are very prideful. And I've been in both roles. Love my colleagues, but I've seen it because, marketers want to take credit for everything. Like, to your point, like they use my piece of content and that's what closed a $2.5 million deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? I mean, unless we're in e-commerce, that seems really highly unlikely, right?
Right.
And salespeople are like, "Oh, I don't need marketing. I'm a salesperson. I can do this all by myself."
Yeah.
That infographic might actually get read faster than the email that you sent or the text that you sent and give more. So we got to recognize like there's a partnership that we need each other, right? And so I think until we do that and we're honest with ourselves, this is really hard to do it by yourselves. Not impossible, but it's becoming harder and harder because the reality of things is we're so distracted today. The buying groups are bigger. The sale is more complex. Sales cycles are getting longer. If COVID showed us nothing, that if you have a disjuncted and not cohesive sales process or buying process, people are going to exit quick. They're just going to bounce because there's any friction and it makes it difficult to buy from you. It's not going to work.
Exactly right. Now, there's a trend these days with the product-led growth where people are coming in and they're doing trials, they're trying out products. So in a way, marketing ends up having a relationship with folks a lot longer. We've all heard the stories about 60%, 80%, whatever it is of the buying journey being before someone gets to sales. And in many cases that can be true where people are looking at content and they're looking at things. But how about that product-led growth? Like marketers are in there selling. Do you have a take on that kind of like try it first type approach? And how
I think it's great, but I think it also eliminates the fact that marketing has to understand the product from a sales lens. And I don't know if you've interacted with, you can sometimes interact with marketers that don't really understand the product. Like they know like the key messages and they know like, the value drivers, but like when you ask them like, can I put you on the phone? Can I put you in a sales conversation? They really struggle. And so with the product-led growth, it's even more important to be in lockstep with salespeople because as a marketer, you need to be able to pivot between marketing speak, because like, we know how we speak to each other,
Yeah.
but that's not how you talk to customers. That's not how you interact with customers. So I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing, like copy and websites being changed to speak more salesy per se, and not be like, we've been around since 1934 and we're the #1 premier. Like,
Yeah.
that's not what buyers want to hear. They want to hear, how are you going to add value? What solution? How can you help me? So I think it illuminates, yes, we absolutely, I love that is happening, but we've got to have even a closer relationship to make sure that this being done correctly.
That's a great point. I mean, I was at a very technical software tools company many years ago, and selling mainframe software development tools. So pretty technical. And
Yeah.
I remember there were marketers that were coming up and they were asking, "Hey, I want to go to this conference. I want to be at this conference, and I know we're exhibiting there. Can I be at the booth?" And boy, that's tough. If you don't know what to say, if all you know is just what I can write on the front of the website,
Yeah.
you don't know your customer, you don't know their pains, you don't know how you're solving the pain. Why would I put you in a booth where all you're going to say is, you can talk to the SE over here,
Yeah. I mean, unless you're there just to hear the conversations
Right.
and to understand the language that, our buyers are talking. I always would suggest marketers in that sense, not to be necessarily in the floor to sell,
Yeah.
but to hear. Because, one of the things I did, especially when I'm, leading strategy, is especially for launching products, and I've had the fortune to launch a lot of products to market. I never get so high and mighty in myself to be like, this is an amazing strategy and we know this is going to work. The minute we start talking to customers, I'm out in the field because I want to hear two things. It's the strategy that I'm putting forth resonating with the customer, or do we need coaching for the salespeople because they're not delivering the messages or they're not delivering the strategy in the right way? And then what language are we hearing back, like word for word from customers? Because certain words may resonate, some words may not, and then we can start to tweak messaging and copy and that sort of thing to match the vernacular of the target buyer.
That is a fantastic point. And and I think about, like, in my own company where we have the SDR team and the ISR team that's doing more of the month-to-month type business within marketing. And it's been a boon for us because we can hear there's nobody in the company that has more conversations with prospects and with customers than this team. So they're able to feed that information back to marketing on a daily basis, on an organic basis, so we're hearing all the time exactly what you're saying, what the customers are asking.
And it's so smart that you guys are doing that, because what I always advocate for marketers is that salespeople are your best and least expensive market research, because to your point, they're having all these rich interactions, this is either field-based or inside sales, these rich interactions with the salespeople. And so you're getting instantaneous feedback. And if you're not tapping into that, you are wasting your market intelligence.
Right.
Because even, and obviously you have to do it at aggregate. And I have been in the situation where one salesperson wants something specific for their territory that only works for them, but somehow in their mind, they think it works for the entire country, right? So we have to look at it from a macro level. But if we're not getting that back from them, and super tactical things, like if we're using a word that the customer's not using, switch the copy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
That's great. So how can someone get started? If I'm a marketer, I don't have a great relationship with sales. What do you think would be my first step?
Yeah, and we talk about in the book, and obviously you probably have read this, but like, to keep it really, really simple, I think, there's a couple things. You need to have everybody have a come to Jesus moment that we have an issue. I think there's a lot of, leaders that are in denial or don't think that the problem is as bad as it is, right? And so I talk about in the book, I list a number of different kind of like diagnostic indicators that you probably have an issue with sales and marketing being dysfunctional. And so some of the things are like high volume leads, low conversion rates, sales and marketing leader potentially having a no relationship or a combative relationship. The other one would be kind of what we talked about, like marketing doesn't really understand product. Sales doesn't respect marketing. So there's a couple different indicators, that we can go through, and I won't go through it because of time, but that is kind of our come to Jesus moment. So like, yes, it is a thing, and it is really negatively impacting your business. And then from there, you really start with sales and marketing leaders coming together and having a conversation.
Yeah.
How can we start to work with each other? What can you do? Because, I was at a conference speaking years ago, And the sales leader came up to me and he was like, Jeff, I really love what you have to talk about. I really had not thought about interacting with my marketing counterpart in that way. We have a great relationship. We get along. We're cordial. We've done events together, that sort of thing. And I said, but you have a dysfunctional business relationship. He's like, yeah. He goes, I never thought of that, because I go, you're not leveraging each other to be more effective within your function. And that is what the essence of Create Togetherness is. It's not about getting along, which is great. Like, I'm glad you guys have a great relationship. But as a growth strategist, I'm more interested in you having a effective business relationship that helps you both do better. And so having that conversation, starting that dialogue to understand where can we start to help each other and get on the same page is a great first step. And then once we do that, we got to get leadership on board. Before any significant change, this idea, I think, when we started to kind of resurface, was about like, put sales and marketing together in a room and they'll work it out. And I'm like, no,
Right.
that's not what's going to happen. This is a business transformation. We have to have the CEO and leadership on board, because what you're going to get is, what many term is that frozen middle management. You'll get some senior leaders that's like, yep, we agree. You might even get some frontline people that say, yep, we agree. But at the end of the day, if we can't move these folks in the middle, these middle managers, it's not going to be sustainable. And that's why you need the CEO level support in order to take this effort on seriously.
That's great. Jeff, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So Jeff Davis, international keynote speaker, author of Create Togetherness. Now, if they want to, if people are listening want to find Create Togetherness or access any of your other insights, where do you recommend they go to?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you can go to my website, which is meetjeffdavis.com.
Yeah.
If you want to grab this guy here, and it's funny because I think my next book's going to be Matt, because every time I do this, you get that little shiny thing.
Yeah.
But either way, this guy here is at createtogethernessbook.com. So we have the paperback as well as the audiobook available. And then you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm really, really active on LinkedIn. And if you search Meet Jeff Davis, I will pull up. There are too many Jeff Davises to tell people to search Jeff Davis.
Yeah.
So Meet Jeff Davis on LinkedIn and across all of my social media. So that's the best way to connect with me.
That's terrific. Definitely recommend the book. It was a great read. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Jeff, thanks again.
Thank you so much.